Introduction to the Science of Hadith by Ibn Salah al-Shahrazuri, 577-643, the most influential book on the Science of Hadith. Category 10, Interrupted Hadith, Ma'rifat al-Munqati'. The doctrines of the scholars of Hadith and others are in a disagreement over the interrupted Hadith and over the difference between it and the loose Hadith, Mursal. One opinion is the view of al-Hakim, the author of the book Ma'rifat Anwa' Ulūm al-Hadīth, and that was already given in the category on the loose Hadith to the effect that the term loose appertains exclusively to a follower. In his view, one form of the interrupted is the isnad, which contains, prior to reaching the level of the follower, a transmitter who did not hear Hadith from the transmitter above him, while no mention, either specific or vague, is made of the individual who is omitted from between the two transmitters. Another form of the interrupted is the isnad, in which one of the transmitters is designated by a vague expression like a man, a teacher, or other similar things. An example of the first form is the hadith we heard from Abdul Razak, from Sufyan, from Abu Ishaq, from Zayd ibn Yuthay, from Hudhayfa, that the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, said, "If you appoint Abu Bakr as a leader, he is strong and honest." When a hadithologist, a hadithi, examines this isnad, he finds its outward form to be that of an uninterrupted hadith, muttasil, yet it is interrupted in two places, because Abdul Razak did not hear it directly from Thawri. Rather, he heard it from Nu'man ibn Abi Shayba al-Janadi, from Thawri. Furthermore, Thawri did not hear it from Abu Ishaq. He instead heard it from Sharik from Abu Ishaq. An example of the second form is the hadith which we heard from Abu A'la ibn Abdullah ibn Shikhir, from two men, from Shaddad ibn Aus, from the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, about the invocation in the ritual prayer. God, I ask for a firm resolve in this matter. God knows best. Another interpretation of the interrupted hadith is the statement of Ibn Abdul Bar, God bless him, to the effect that the loose appertains exclusively to the followers and the term interrupted includes those and other kinds of hadith with incohesive isnads. This view is that the interrupted hadith is everything with an incohesive isnad, whether it is ascribed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, or to someone else. Another opinion is that the interrupted hadith is identical to the loose, and both terms include everything that has an incohesive isnad. This view is the most likely. Various groups of jurists and others have adopted it, and it is the view that the expert Abu Bakr al-Khatib gave in his Kifaya. However, most of the hadith which are described in actual usage as loose are hadith which a follower related directly from the Prophet, peace be upon him. And most of the hadith that are described as interrupted are hadith which someone below the level of the followers related directly from the companions. For instance, Malik from Ibn Umar and the like, and God knows best. Another opinion is the one which Abu Bakr al-Khatib related from a person knowledgeable in hadith to the effect that the interrupted hadith consists of an account of the words or deeds of a follower or someone lower, halted at him. This interpretation is peculiar and far-fetched. God knows best. Category 11, Problematic Hadith, Ma'rifat al-Mu'dal. Problematic is the name of a particular type of interrupted hadith, munqati'. Every problematic hadith is interrupted, but not every interrupted hadith is problematic. Some people, as stated above, call interrupted hadith loose, mursal. The problematic hadith consists of the hadith having an isnad lacking two or more transmitters. The scholars of hadith say, he transmitted the hadith as a problematic, so the form of the term is mu'dal. The derivation of this term is obscure from the standpoint of lexicography. I investigated the matter and found the phrase amr adil, that is, an extremely difficult affair. Pay no attention to the form mu'dil, even if it is like adil in sense. An example of the problematic hadith is one in which a student of a follower, tabi'i, relates saying, the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, said. Another example is a hadith which someone lower than the students of the followers relates directly from the Messenger of God, or from Abu Bakr, Umar or others, without mentioning the intermediaries between the individual and himself. Abu Nasr al-Sijzi brought up the case of a transmitter saying, it reached me, ballaghani. Like Malik saying, it reached me from Abu Hurairah that the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, said, the slave is due his food and clothing, and said, the scholars of hadith called that problematic. Therefore, all of the instances when the jurists and others write in their books, the Messenger of God said such, and the like are considered problematic. The expert Abu Bakr al-Khatib at one point called this kind of hadith loose, and that is in conformity with the doctrine of those who call all hadith with incohesive isnads loose, as was discussed above. Abu Abdullah al-Hakim made a type of problematic hadith the instances when a follower of a student relates from that follower a hadith halted at him while it is uninterrupted and supported, up to the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, from another student of the follower. An example is the hadith we heard from A'mash from Sha'bi, in which he said, "On the day of judgment it will be said to each man, you did such and such, and he will say, I did not do that, and his mouth will be sealed." A'mash gave it as problematic, and Sha'bi elsewhere had the hadith from Sha'bi from Anas from the Messenger of God that it is uninterrupted and supported. This is an excellent point, because interruption through the omission of one transmitter comes under the heading of being halted, waqf. This particular hadith contains an interruption to the extent of two transmitters, that is, the companion, Anas, the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, therefore is more appropriately termed problematic. God knows best. Subsidiary issues. 1. The isnad containing the word from, al-isnad al-mu'annan. This is the isnad in which X from Y is said. Some people consider it loose and interrupted, until the cohesion of its isnad becomes clear through more explicit version of the isnad. The correct view, and that is which is followed in practice, is that it is a form of uninterrupted isnad. The majority of hadith authorities and others have adopted this view, and those who exclusively stipulate sound hadith include hadith from in the isnad in their compilations and accept them. The expert in the hadith and Quran, Abu Umar ibn Abdul Barr, came close to claiming that there was a consensus of the hadith experts on that. Abu Amr al-Dani al-Mukri did claim that there was a consensus of transmitters on it. This holds true on the condition that it is established that those to whom the transmission by form an-ana is ascribed met each other and were free of the taint of misrepresentation, tadlis. In that case, it is interpreted in accordance with its apparent cohesion, unless something contradicting that comes to light. In our time, and in the recent past, the use of from in licensing, ijaza, has become common among those who consider themselves to be scholars of hadith. When one of them says something like, I recited to X from Y, qara'tu ala fulanin and fulan, or something like that, it is understood from this that X related from Y by license, and it is obvious that this does not keep it from being uninterrupted. God knows best. 2. There is disagreement over the interpretation of a transmitter saying that Ana, X, had said such and such. Does it have the same status as from in regard to rendering the isnad cohesive when it is established that the two transmitters met each other, that is, until evidence that there is an interruption in it comes to light? An example of this is Malik from Zuhri from Sa'id ibn Musayyib said such and such. We heard that Malik, God be pleased with him, used to regard from X that X as equal, and that Ahmed ibn Hanbal, God be pleased with him, regarded them as different. Ibn Abdul Barr related from a large number of scholars that from and that are equal, and that it is not a question of particles and words, but rather the transmitters meeting, attending class, having audition, and seeing each other. That is, first granting freedom from misrepresentation. If the audition of one from the other can be established, the hadith of the one from the other is considered cohesive regardless of which term is used, until evidence of interruption appears. Ibn Abdul Barr related from Abu Bakr al-Bardiji that the particle that is interpreted as an instance of interruption until evidence of audition appears for that very report from another line of transmission. Ibn Abdul Barr said, in my opinion, this is nonsense, because the consensus of scholars that an isnad connected with the companion is the same, whether the companion says in it the Messenger of God said, or the Messenger of God said, or from the Messenger of God that he said, or I heard the Messenger of God saying, God knows best. In the superlative musnad of the superlative Ya'qub ibn Shaybah, I found something similar to that of Ibn Abdul Barr, related from the expert Abu Bakr al-Bardiji. Ya'qub ibn Shaybah mentioned the hadith from Abu Zubair, related from Ibn al-Hanafiyyah from Ammar, in which Ammar said, I went to the Prophet, peace be upon him, while he was praying, and I greeted him, and he returned the greeting to me. Ya'qub ibn Shaybah made it connected and supported it, Musnad Mawsul. Ya'qub ibn Shaybah also mentioned the relation of the hadith Qais ibn Sa'ad from Ata ibn Abi Rabah from Ibn al-Hanafiyyah that Ammar passed the Prophet, peace be upon him, while he was praying, and he considered this version loose because Ibn al-Hanafiyyah said that Ammar did something, and he did not say from Ammar. God knows best. Al-Khatib, in treating this question, cites an example, the hadith of Nafi' from Ibn Umar, that he asked the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, "Is one of us allowed to go to sleep while he's in a state of ritual impurity?" In another transmission it reads, from Nafi' from Ibn Umar, that Umar said, "Messenger of God," he says, "the outward form of the first relation necessitates that it be considered one of the supported hadith of Umar from the Prophet, peace be upon him, and that the outward form of the second necessitates that it be considered one of the supported hadith of Ibn Umar from the Prophet, peace be upon him." This example is not relevant to what concerns us here, because in this matter, according to the doctrine of a great number of scholars, judging cohesion depends exclusively on meeting and contemporaneousness. That is, rather than on the terminology appearing in the isnad and in this hadith, they were mutual and repeated because Ibn Umar's connection to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and to Umar, God be pleased with him, in addition to the transmitter Ibn Umar, status as a companion of both of them. Al-Khatib's interpretation would require, on the basis of one line of transmission, that is, the second, that Ibn Umar related the hadith from the Prophet, peace be upon him, and on the basis of the other, that Ibn Umar related it from Umar, from the Messenger of God. God knows better. Stay tuned.